In a shocking twist that unfolded just moments ago in Zalisa, political tensions reached a boiling point, leading to the assassination of Vasily Nebens, Russia's representative. As he prepared to deliver a pivotal speech about the world's geopolitical climate, he was cut down at the very moment the leaders of the West were set to make their presence felt. While Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, stood by, Nebens began to reveal undisclosed secrets that sent ripples of disbelief through the gathered diplomats. What truths lay hidden behind the veils of politics? Stay tuned, for this story will take you through unexpected revelations. Vasily Nebens approached Zalisa, the night shrouded in an eerie silence that foreboded the violence to come. He wore a dark blue suit, smooth and well-fitted, yet not new, an attire that belied the weight of the occasion. The calmness over his face was deceptive, it was marred by a weary knowledge of the darkness lurking behind every political move. His eyes, seasoned by witness to many truths, held a depth of experience that spoke volumes. As he stepped into the realm of colorful flags, symbols of allegiance that now felt like stains of blood, he stood before the microphone, a black cable symbolizing the connection to the amplified tensions in the air. Security personnel subtly adjusted their positions, each one acutely aware that today, words would carry the gravitas of heavy artillery. Suddenly, the door swung open as Mark Rutte entered, flanked by Alonso Vetter. Rutte, an imposing figure, exuded a composed demeanor that seemed chilling to those who looked closely. It was a calculated calmness that suggested he was all too well aware of the stakes at hand. As he positioned himself for the proceedings, a collective tension tightened the atmosphere, palpable, almost electric. When Rutte began his speech, the words poured forth like a drumbeat heralding a storm. To Russia, it's a special operation, but to us, it is war, he declared, striking at the heart of Russia's narrative. Each phrase felt like a hammer striking stone, the impact resonating through the assembled crowd. Diplomats and aides, momentarily distracted from their duties, chose to listen, unlike any other day. Rutte asserted boldly that millions had already suffered due to Russia's aggression, calling for their isolation from the world. His piercing gaze seemed to challenge the Russian delegation shrouded in mist at one end of the hall. With every word, he painted a damning picture of destruction, one that evoked powerful images of devastation, thousands of shattered lives, cities left in ruins. Yet Nebens, his calm exterior concealing a storm beneath, prepared to respond. After letting Rutte's words settle, he rose slowly, the weight of his presence unmistakable. "Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rutte," he began, his voice low but resonant, interwoven with a steely resolve, "you speak eloquently of your emotions but ignore the realities of our actions." His words were not merely responses, they were challenges that pierced through the established facade of diplomatic decorum. Every phrase weighed heavy with meaning. Would he turn the tides of the conversation and shed light on the deep-rooted biases at play? As the air thickened with anticipation, Nebens launched into a measured argument. Where was the integrity in calling out the actions of others whilst cloaked in the guise of moral authority? Who bombed Yugoslavia without the blessing of international peacekeeping? He continued, the weight of his accusation reverberating like a charge in the air. It wasn't Russia, it was you. The chamber held its breath, caught in a moment suspended in time. Would this bold confrontation shake the foundations of the meeting? Would it reveal a deeper truth that had long been buried? Thus, the clash of ideologies unfolded, a battle of words saturated with underlying fears, unspoken resentment, and the desperate grasp for control over the narrative. As tensions flared and emotions ran raw, the world held its breath to see which way the balance would tip. In this high-stakes game of diplomacy, the outcome could redefine alliances and alter the course of history itself. In an atmosphere thick with tension, anticipation crackled like static electricity. Those present sensed that today, words would carry a weight heavier than steel. As the door creaked open, a familiar figure stepped in. Mark Rutte stood poised, flanked by Alonso Vetter, a man with a commanding presence and movements as precise as any protocol laid down in stone. The NATO insignia on his lapel seemed to shimmer coldly, intensifying the room's already chilly air. Rutte's demeanor was unsettlingly calm, a far cry from anger or tension. It was a calm that hinted at calculated intent. The driver pressed the pedal, propelling the vehicle into the arena of words. A phrase emerged from his lips, echoing like a drumbeat before a storm, the cadence gripping the audience. Russia calls it a special operation, he began, his voice devoid of breath but laden with conviction. For us, this is war. The words resonated against the walls, each against striking like a hammer on stone. A palpable silence enveloped the crowd, drowning out the world outside. The cameras caught every nuance, the watchers leaning in, hungry for the unfolding drama. Millions of lives destroyed, he thundered, his voice an arrow, sharp and aimed. Thousands of cities ravaged. Russia must be isolated. His words cut through the air, punctuated by the silence of those seated at the table, whose presence cast shadows over the proceedings. Ruth's gray eyes, intense and unwavering, held a flicker of calculated ferocity, every word a deliberate blow aimed at dismantling the facade of diplomacy. As his message flowed, applause followed. But it was short-lived, interrupted by the flicker of a hand from the chairman. I now present to you the words of the representative of the Russian Federation, he declared, shifting the atmosphere from tension to a fragile hope for resolution. The camera swiveled back, capturing the moment as Ruth crossed his pages, preparing to respond. The world held its breath, the air thick with potential energy. Would the counterstrike be as formidable as the initial assault? The cameras lingered on the hall, capturing every silent breath as the Russian delegates stayed rigid, struck by the words hung in the air. Only Ruda dared to break the freeze, his interruption sparking chaos under the guise of calm. The meeting room remained eerily hushed and sterile, a fortress of unspoken rules where no dissent was allowed to linger. Cameras panned slowly, inching toward the exit, sealing away the hidden turmoil. Empty corridors stretched outside, no onlookers dared remain in view. Nebens lowered himself to his seat, his gaze dropping like a curtain to conceal the storm brewing within. He despised this scripted farce, yet it was his battleground. In moments like this, revealing emotion could dull his sharpest weapon. Ruda, across the divide, appeared broken, his facade cracking. His security team whispered reassurances, claiming the crowd's favor always lay with him. He leaned toward his aide, urgency tight in his voice, something veering off script. He clutched the notes tighter, hands betraying a tremor he couldn't hide. The chairman muttered into the mic, words fading into whispers near the door. Tension coiled there, electric and alive, not through connections but through every pulsing heartbeat. The room had become a live wire, nerves frayed, ready for any spark. Then Ruda seized the microphone without a nod, his voice booming, shattering the fragile quiet like glass underfoot. You keep peddling the myth that the Soviet Union redeemed Europe, he snarled, the words dripping with scorn. Time for honesty. Europe would have defeated the Nazis and the Soviets too. Picture that, freedom straight from our grasp, no red shadows looming. Silence blanketed the hall at first, thick and suffocating. Heads jerked in disbelief, eyes widening in shock. Even behind the scenes, staff froze mid-motion, doubting what echoed from the official speaker. Delegates from Japan blinked, stunned by the raw fury. Nebens fixed him with a steady gaze, unyielding at first. Then, deep within those tranquil depths, a blaze ignited, raw and vengeful. He paused, reaching for the water glass with deliberate calm, feeling its cool grip against his palm. He sipped, the liquid's sharp edge cutting through the bitterness rising in him. Setting it down, he rose, his frame commanding the space. Mr. Ruda, his voice cut through, low and lethal, I must respond. The room exhaled fear, even the gripped operators fearing the lens. He didn't hesitate now. By claiming Europe could triumph without the Soviets, you're not just insulting Russians, you're desecrating the fallen of Dutch, French, Polish, Serbian lives. They bled alongside the Red Army. You're Dutch, aren't you? Your land, choked under boots for 5 hellish years, who shattered that yoke for you? The Americans? Hardly. Soviet tanks stormed Berlin as your streets still smoldered. Doesn't that rage build in your chest? Every scar on Europe? It survives because of their sacrifice. Your people, the Dutch, gave all, they didn't plead for mercy. They perished so you could bask safely here. And now, 80 years on, you spit on that legacy, lounging in air-conditioned havens overseas. How dare you cheapen blood that bought your world? His words hammered down, every syllable a crushing force, turning the diplomat into a guardian of memories long buried. Whispers rippled from African envoys, Asia's delegates stirred uneasily. The center of power fell into rare stillness, where even the faint buzz of microphones screamed too loud. Outside, media swarmed the streets, scent of rain mixing with anticipation. You prophesy a Europe sans Russia, he pressed on, his voice a crescendo. But a continent without its essence? That's not vision, it's a death sentence, a body crumbling without its lifeblood. He released the mic, its echo lingering like a challenge. The chairman tried to redirect, but voices ignored him. Eyes locked on these two titans, the table a chasm of divide. Cameras zoomed in, one face, a calm fortress, the other, unraveling like frayed rope. Ruda fumbled for words, but they dissolved, his mask slipping under the unrelenting truth. What outrageous lie shattered under the spotlight? Cling on, did Nebens hold the key to toppling an empire with mere words? Could humiliation blindside a premier, or was a darker secret about to erupt? The room fell silent, an eerie hush enveloping everyone present. Even the technicians, usually murmuring into their headsets, paused, their disbelief palpable. The once methodical Japanese delegate stared at Rutte, his demeanor shifting subtly as an unfamiliar emotion flickered behind his calm expression. Suddenly, tension hung thick in the air, making it hard for anyone to speak. He reached for a glass of water, his hand trembling just slightly as he took a sip, then set it down deliberately. I need a moment, he finally asserted, his voice steady yet underscored with urgency. The pressure in the room was suffocating. By claiming that Europe would have triumphed without the Soviet Union, you don't just insult Russians. You belittle the countless Dutch, French, Poles, and Serbs who fought valiantly alongside the Red Army in those dark times, he pressed, his gaze fixed sharply on Rutte. You're Dutch, correct? Your nation endured 5 long years of occupation. Who liberated your cities? The Americans? That's a misconception. Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin while your cities still smoldered from the war. Rutte sat there, locked in silence, each accusation he faced a strike against the walls he'd built around himself. He was now a tapestry woven from the threads of history, every crease forming a reminder of Europe's enduring sacrifices. In the Netherlands, no one demanded glory for those lost lives, they simply died, he continued passionately. And now, after 80 years, you contend that Europe could have flourished sans them? How easily one forgets the cost of freedom when cozying under the air conditioning in New York. The German's words hung heavily in the fresh tension that settled over the audience. In that moment, he transformed from a mere diplomat into a symbol of those long-forgotten voices craving acknowledgement. We don't need pained nostalgia, we need a reckoning, a memory that must live on in Europe's core. Suddenly, within the sea of silence, a commotion disrupted the atmosphere as members of the African delegation abruptly stood and left, a ripple of discontent spreading. Tension escalated as even the subtle hum of technology seemed amplified in the stillness. Thrumming outside, media throngs crowded the streets ready to weigh in on the unfolding saga. Talking about the future of Europe without Russia, he proclaimed, isn't visionary. It's delusional, it's a diagnosis of a dying continent. As he relinquished the microphone, frustrations erupted among the assembly. It felt as though the young delegate had thrown down a gauntlet. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the conflicting expressions on their faces, one calm, composure reminiscent of stone, the other a raw portrayal of strife and passion igniting in the battle for truth. In that charged moment, the stakes had never been higher. What would come next? Would diplomacy shatter or transform under scrutiny? Each heartbeat resonated as history poised to turn a new page. A shocking confrontation unfolds in the Grand Hall of Zalisa, where the stakes couldn't be higher. Just minutes ago, Vasily Nebens, a key representative from Russia, was poised to deliver a speech that held the weight of nations. But in a stunning twist, as Nebens spoke boldly against Western leaders, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. What unfolded left everyone gasping. How could a single statement turn the tides of power? Stay with us as we explore the unexpected clash of ideologies and emotions that resonate beyond borders. As the evening approached, Nebbins made his way to the venue, enveloped in the haunting stillness of an impending storm. Dressed in a deep indigo suit that hugged his silhouette, he navigated through a sea of flags, colors fluttering with history and emotion. Each flag represented struggles, victories, and sacrifices. He felt the weight of expectation crushing down on him as he entered the hall. A chilling silence filled the room, broken only by the soft hum of conditioning units and the muffled whispers of aides. Yet, every eye was glued to him, as though the air buzzed with a static charge that hinted at the momentous clash about to erupt. The cameras were ready. Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, approached the podium. His commanding presence and precise movements seemed calculated, too perfect, like a well-rehearsed actor. When he began to speak, his tone echoed like a drumbeat announcing a war cry. Russia has declared a special operation, he declared, as murmurs rippled through the audience. The hall came alive, and tension soared. Rutte's words were sharp as blades, targeting Russia's actions with fierce indignation. Nebbins felt his pulse quicken. The ball was now in his court. Stepping up to the microphone felt like stepping into a battlefield. "Mr. Chairman," he began, his voice low but resolute. "Your claims of peace ring hollow. Who bombed Yugoslavia without care for sanctions? Who invaded Iraq?" Each accusation struck like thunder, sending shockwaves through the audience. The stakes were palpably high, the room buzzed with anticipation, like an explosive just moments away from detonation. Despite facing a barrage of accusations, Nebbins stood firm. "A united Europe will never forget the sacrifices of our soldiers," he declared, his eyes boring into Rutte's with a fierce intensity. The room held its breath. Would the diplomatic dance transform into an outright war of words? Just as Rutte prepared to retort, a sudden silence swallowed the hall. It was a moment suspended in time, filled with the gravity of history. "How easy it is to forget," Nebbins continued, "to erase the sacrifices that paved the way to today." The tension crackled in the air. Could the narrative shift? And then, in a moment of dramatic tension, the other nation's representatives stirred. This was not just political theater, it was the clash of painful memories, echoing the bloodshed of generations past. The memories ran deep, historical wounds lay fresh. Would this exchange spark the conflagration of old grievances and strike a fatal blow to their fragile peace? The universe felt like it had paused right there, waiting with bated breath to see who would emerge unscathed. In this pivotal moment, the clash of ideologies unfolded, one built on remembrance, and the other on power. Would one voice rise above the cacophony to redefine the future, or would history repeat itself, caught in a dangerous cycle of resentment yet again? The answer loomed, heavy as the silence that followed. The lights flickered to life in the stern hall. A heavy breath escaped from someone's lips, and the sound of a bell echoed ominously, signaling the dangerously charged atmosphere. Tension filled the air like a thunderstorm rolling in. With an unyielding calm, Vasily Nebbins prepared for his moment. "Mr. Rutte," he began slowly, "you speak of remembering the victims, yet the truth is far from black and white." He turned his gaze to Mark Rutte, his voice firm yet unhurried. "You claim Europe could have prevailed without the Soviet Union. Do you truly understand the cost of that victory? 27 million lives lost, not merely numbers, but souls extinguished. Each of those lives represents a family, a community, a heartbeat silenced so that you could stand here and speak." A brief, weighted silence fell, thick with the gravity of his words. The auditorium sat frozen, the weight of history palpable in the air. It was as if time itself had ceased. Nebbins could see the faces of delegates etched with disbelief, even the camera operator hesitated, unsure whether to capture this moment. The denouement loomed, he had long anticipated this clash and felt an unshakable resolve within him. As he paused to let the enormity of his statement sink in, he could almost taste the tension. It lingered like a metallic flavor in the back of his throat. "Mr. Rutte," he continued, his voice cutting through the charged silence, you've just opened Pandora's box. You asserted that Europe could win without the USSR. Who liberated Warsaw? Who endured the siege of Leningrad? Who stormed Berlin? With every word, he built an undeniable crescendo, his emotions woven into an intricate tapestry of history. You, the Dutch, he asserted carefully, your nation, occupied for 5 long years. Do you remember the ghosts of the past? It was not American or British forces that opened the roads to Amsterdam. It was the resolve of Soviet troops. He let the phrase linger like an unanswered prayer. The air grew thick with disbelief. Nebens recognized the look in Ruth's eyes, an uneasy flinch, a flicker of uncertainty. You stand in this hall today, daring to proclaim that Europe could thrive without us. This is a dangerous fallacy. Those who courageously fought and fell beneath the soil of your homeland demand justice, even if they do not speak. The silence enveloped them all, nearly suffocating, as Nebens continued. Each word he uttered resonated like the toll of a bell, heavy and significant. The room's occupants had stopped breathing, caught in the moment, caught in history. Rudd opened his mouth to respond, but no sound emerged. He was overwhelmed by a force he hadn't expected. Ambiguity and clarity tangled together like shadows at dusk. Nebens leaned closer, his voice rising. We stood firm while your nations thrived in safety. Do we not deserve recognition? Is it too much to ask for your gratitude? Each syllable was poised like a blade, ready to slice deeper into the heart of this confrontation. With the stage now set for an explosive exchange of ideologies, both men faced monumental truths. Would the past remain shrouded in myth, or could the weight of reality ultimately shift the course of their nation's destinies? The air was electric, teetering on yet another precipice of revelation. In a world where often the past meets a present fraught with conflict, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation. Vasily Nebens, the representative from Russia, stood poised to speak, amidst a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Just moments earlier, he had been a mere participant. Now, he prepared to deliver a voice of dissent. The silence in the hall was palpable, each breath a struggle against the weight of impending words. Mr. Rudd, Nebens began, his tone steady yet resonating with intensity. You claim that Europe could have triumphed without the USSR. Do you have any idea of the cost? 27 million. Not a mere statistic, but lives lost. 27 million souls in the courts, in churches where hearts stopped beating, allowing you to carry on. His assertion echoed in the chamber, a heavy stone cast into an otherwise still lake. He paused momentarily, allowing the magnitude of his words to sink in. We don't seek your gratitude, but we demand remembrance. The impact of his declaration rippled through the audience, drawing attention across delegations from India and China. Journalists quietly raised their phones, intent on capturing this moment of historical significance. You label us as an empire, Nebens continued, his voice rising slightly. Yet it is your coalition that dictates who deserves sovereignty. Today it's Russia, tomorrow, it could be China, or any voice dissenting against your constructed narrative. His words transformed into accusations, a mirror reflecting the hypocrisy of the power dynamics at play. The tension in the room shifted as he articulated. You focus on a future for Europe without Russia, but know this, Russia is not just a part of Europe, it is this continent's very breath. You can attempt to silence Mr. Rudd, but the air itself will remain infused with our essence. The weight of this proclamation crescendoed in the hall, some listeners leaning forward, hearts pounding with the gravity of the moment. Ruth's expression soured, caught off guard by the force of Nebens' resolve. You romanticize the past, he retorted, a stark defense against the onslaught of historicity. You live in nostalgia while Europe strides into the future. Yet Nebens held his ground, his gaze keen and unwavering, refusing to cower. In that moment, the very fabric of diplomacy transformed into an intricate tapestry of history, power, and identity. As the room held its collective breath, the understanding dawned on all. This was no longer merely a debate but a reckoning wrapped in profound implications. The air crackled with uncertainty, each viewer aware they were witnessing more than a discussion but a pivotal moment that could change the narrative. In a tense moment at an international summit, silence enveloped the grand hall like an electric charge, anticipating the impending clash of words. Delegates shifted nervously, aware that one wrong move could spark a verbal explosion. The only sound was that of rustling paper, echoing in the hushed atmosphere. Each delegate felt the weight of history hanging in the air as they awaited their turn to speak. A palpable tension gripped the room, a stark reminder that this was no ordinary diplomatic exchange, it was a moment steeped in the gravitas of the past. As the chairman glanced at the time, frustration shadowed his expression. He knew that diplomacy had dissolved into a fierce battle of narratives. The audience sensed this shift, they understood that the stakes had been raised beyond mere words. When Mark Rutte fell silent, a thick stillness settled over the gathering. The air felt charged, as if the collective anticipation was a living entity, waiting to pounce. Rutte appeared momentarily lost, grappling with the heavy echoes of his own words. He seemed caught in a loop, an echo chamber of hypocrisy reverberating in his mind. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice betraying his internal struggle. "Mr. Chairman," he began, but his thoughts stumbled. The audience held its breath, sensing that the duel of wits was far from over. "Mr. Rutte, your silence speaks volumes. You assert that the Soviet Union played a pivotal role in history, yet what about the shadows of Afghanistan, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia? Let us not forget the tanks that rolled into Budapest. Claiming liberation while crushing destinies, Vasily Nebens countered, his voice steady but charged with intensity. The weight of his words sent a shiver through the audience, igniting a flicker of defiance. The official's fingers trembled slightly as he spoke, the truth layered with bitterness. You talk of memory, but let's reflect on all that transpired. Your history isn't as clean as you portray. The room filled with murmurs, a swell of commotion stirred by his accusations. Nebens lifted his gaze, unwavering, determined to face the collective condemnation that followed. He pressed the microphone, intent on cutting through the noise. Who bombed Belgrade? Who reduced Libya to ruins? His words hung in the air, eliciting gasps and murmurs of disbelief. The delegates watched, caught in a drama that felt larger than them all, with every eye fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Would the truth serve as a weapon or merely fuel the flames of animosity? In that moment, history loomed large, demanding acknowledgement and sparking questions about the narratives shaping their world today. In a tense atmosphere, Vasily Nebens, a representative from Russia, prepared for an explosive exchange in Zalisa. After witnessing shocking interpersonal dynamics during a diplomatic meeting, tension simmered just beneath the surface. As Nebens faced off with Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, unexpected words hung in the air, foreshadowing monumental consequences. As Nebens stepped onto the stage, he was clad in a dark blue suit, its fabric smoothed to perfection despite the night's swirling emotions. His face betrayed experience, revealing both a calm demeanor and the weight of knowledge that aging did not impart. Surrounded by a sea of diverse flags, the air resonated with the echoes of past conflicts. The eyes of the crowd, filled with anticipation, felt like a palpable weight pressing upon him. The moment came when Rutte casually dismissed the gravity of Russia's stance, declaring their military action a special operation, effectively ignoring the destruction wrought. It was a dangerous game of words, each phrase intended as a calculated jab, targeting not just the strength of Russia, but its existence. The audience hung on every syllable, but it was Nebens' rise from his seat that would shift the narrative entirely. Mr. Rutte, his voice cut through the underlying tension, low yet firm, you speak of diplomacy as if it were a game of chess. But your pawns have always moved without consent. The words ricocheted through the hall like a thunderclap, a metaphorical storm building. What would be his next move? In the ensuing silence, Nebens laid down the truth. Confronting the established narrative of Western actions in former conflicts. Who bombed Yugoslavia without reason? Who laid waste to Libya? Not Russia. The blood of innocent lives cries out from yonder past. His voice intensified, waves of emotion crashing against the barriers of decorum. Just then, a faint yet distinct sound cut through the atmosphere. A whisper of acceptance began to ripple through the audience. One clap, a hesitant palm meeting palm, then another, and soon a wave of applause began to swell. Electricity surged, a collective realization ignited amongst those present. What lay beyond this exchange? Was it merely diplomacy, or the spark of a revolution in language? Would Neben's truths ripple across the world stage, inciting actions far beyond the confines of this room? And amidst the chaos of conflicting histories and futures, was a single question poised to shatter it all: what happens when the past refuses to be forgotten? As this idea loomed large, Ruth's expression hardened. The stakes were higher than either man had anticipated. What awaited them next in this endless game of political chess? In an intense atmosphere thick with anticipation, Mark Rutte returned to his seat after a brief pause. Each step he took seemed to measure the space, the tension visible in the air. He caught the heavy gaze of his guest, who remained perfectly poised yet palpable with weighty silence. Inside the chamber, something crackled, like a fire smoldering just out of sight. The cameras, omnipresent, were ready to capture every word, every nuance. Rutte knew the stakes were high. The battle of words had ended not in victory, but in the looming sense of power slipping away as he prepared to speak. Wasn't that what had driven his predecessors to this moment? Power in the chamber felt almost tangible, suffused with the threat of what might unfold next. As the chairman opened the floor, a young man rose amidst the silence. The wait had been electric, and Rutte seized the moment, pressing the microphone button firmly. His voice resonated with a compelling weight. "Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues," he began, the metal in his tone feeling heavier than usual. "We have all witnessed the tragic oratory of the Russian representative." With disdain subtly lacing his words, Rutte reflected, diplomacy is not a performance. He countered the narratives woven by his opponent with resolute clarity. The Soviet Union left not just ruins, but shattered lives. You speak of history, Mr. Nebens, but let's not sugarcoat your legacy, it is marred by blood. As he continued, a chill swept through the room. Your applause can't mask the shadows that linger in your past, he exclaimed, his voice carrying the weight of history. Hungary, Afghanistan, these are scars that warrant reflection. We must acknowledge that your pursuits have birthed a legacy of fear across nations. Around him, the light dimmed in response, creating a somber ambience. You may cloak your actions in the veil of alliance, but beneath lies a tale of coercion, he said, his eyes piercing through the pretense. Whispers fluctuated in the corners of the room, like rustling leaves provoking an unsettling awareness among the attendees. Could they feel the pulse of truth rising? Order in the hall began to unravel as Rutte's words struck chords of memory and confrontation. Tension bubbled dangerously, anticipation charged the foyer. With an unexpected pivot, Rutte took a breath and loaded his next statement, poised to ignite a storm of dialogue. Is it not time we remember that your victories carry the weight of unspeakable crimes? The room held its breath. Every word he spoke punctured through the fabric of diplomatic decorum, weaving a narrative too potent to ignore. The lingering uncertainty, where would this discourse lead? The answer hovered in the air, intoxicating and tantalizing, just beyond reach. In the aftermath of that charged exchange, Rutte sat back, his sharp gaze sharpening like steel under a cold lens. He understood the shift. Yesterday's words faded like old newsprint. History wouldn't bend. Fatigue draped the room like stale words and unspoken debts. Delegations from Asia, Africa, and South America stirred, eyes alive with something sharper than protocol. What started as a distant echo now roared as a storm threatening global walls. Imagine this: has the West's moral compass spun so wildly off course that they've hijacked the world's narrative? Shocking revelations pour out like blood from a hidden wound, the truth about who really flooded distant shores with colonial gunships. The chairman slammed his gavel, shattering the thick silence that hummed like a trio of wary microphones. Early speakers droned on with formal tedium, flickers of humanitarian pleas, economic murmurs, whispers of human rights. Words drifted like faded wallpaper in a dusty room. No one dared plunge into the abyss. Then, the Indian delegate rose. Her sari shimmered in the harsh lights, catching sunbeams like ocean foam crashing against unbreakable rock. A lotus pendant swung gently at her throat, a quiet symbol of her nation's power to speak truths while others huddled in shadows. Her English flowed softly, each syllable a sharp blade carving into the room's stiff armor. "We've watched this spectacle for 2 days, Lana said, her voice a velvet hammer. Heard the outbursts, seen the raw emotions. It echoes familiar divisions, us versus them. But honestly, Prime Minister." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes piercing. "Is the world that neatly carved?" Heads turned, even among the most stoic observers. Europe claims Russia crossed a line. But who anointed them judges of the entire globe? When the West bombards the horizon, does it ever whisper to us about ripples drowning our villagers? Her calm words built pressure, like water swelling behind a dam. She fixed her gaze on Rutte. "You sling accusations at Russia. Yet please, who propped up colonial machines in the East? Who drained resources, built empires on our bones? Russia never sailed warships into our seas, guns blazing. It didn't chain our workers in brutal camps. You did." Rutte stirred, lips parting to counter, but the chair's icy command froze him. "We're not shielding Russia," he muttered tersely. "We defend the fragile framework of global order." But rewind to that explosive moment, Rutte's face twisted, a man cornered by history's ghosts. What dark secret from Europe's buried past could shatter their facade next, leaving alliances crumbling like dust in a forgotten wind? Imagine the shock in Zalica. Just minutes ago, Vasily Nebens, Russia's fierce representative, shattered illusions with words no one expected, exposing truths hidden from the world. Diplomacy became a battlefield, and the air thickened with unspoken betrayals. How could one man's courage turn a diplomatic farce into a legend? Tune in for the reveals, as battles raged not just on fields, but in minds, where every glance carried the sting of forgotten wars. In the dim glow of Zalica's sterile chamber, echoes of Nebens' earlier clash lingered like a storm's aftermath. He had just dismantled Mark Rutte's icy facade, reminding the hall of blood-spilled victories that Europe erased from memory. Now, the room hummed with tension, air heavy with metallic undertones from vents and polished wood. Sweat beaded on necks, a faint odor of fear mingling with lavender from a distant vase. Rutte, his face a mask of cracked stone, leaned forward, defiance flickering in his gray eyes, like ash from a long-forgotten fire. "I apologize for your country's pain," he said, voice slicing through the silence, "but let's not forget. Europe birthed technological wonders and human rights. Without it, you'd never claim this seat." His words dripped with calculated calm, each syllable a pebble in a stagnant pond. Nebens, unyielding, met his gaze squarely. "Lord Rutte," he replied, his tones imbued with an earthy resonance, as if continents themselves spoke. "We absorb this narrative daily, old empires spinning tales of virtue. Europe preaches values. America shouts liberty. Russia honors memory. But where does truth reside in this theater of shadows?" His eyes held no tremor, steady as ancient oaks against western winds. Yet the chamber stirred anew. India and China's envoys rose, their presences commanding, dry palms resting firmly on gleaming tables. A sharp scent of aged parchment filled the air, mingling with the subtle creak of shifting chairs. China echoes India's stance, the Chinese representative intoned slowly, each word a deliberate chisel in shared stone. Resistance reverberates. Who shields the globe, and who merely disguises dominion under noble terms? His gaze swept the room, fearless, probing the depths where hypocrisy festers. "You speak of order," Nebens continued, his voice a quiet thunder, "but remember who forged chaos only to bandage it. Who raised bridges, then peddled rebuilt packs. This masquerade of diplomacy smells strongly of mere cowardice." Pauses hung heavy. The hall absorbed it, a collective inhalation echoing softly. Bright lights glinted on sweating brows, the tactile chill of the gavels would underscoring every heartbeat. But Rutte recoiled inwardly, his posture a fortress crumbling. On tables polished to mirrors, his reflection mocked him, a silhouette of defeat. Frustration bloomed in his temples, a dull ache pulsing like far-off artillery. In a flashback, he recalled a boy's day in the Netherlands, the earthy mud of liberation under Soviet tanks, a bitter scent of diesel and victory's iron bite. Now, decades later, that revelation twisted like a knife in his core. Had their progress truly sprung from bloodied earth? Or was it theft draped in enlightenment's cloak? His hands clenched subtly, knuckles whitening against unseen phantom pains. South Africa's envoy joined then, her presence a bronze flame in the fray. Short hair framed sharp features, her jacket a tangible armor against ideological storms. The air warmed faintly with her resolve, a whisper of jasmine cutting through the chill. Europe fashioned peace through colonialism, she declared, her voice resonant with forgotten echoes. Without it, perhaps we yield our places at this table willingly? Her words ignited the crowd, poised for eruption. Ruda interrupted once more, sharper this time, desperation edging his tone like cracking glass. He sensed the tide turning fully against him, not just Nebens, but an alliance of continents reclaiming narratives. What if history's victors now confessed their debts aloud, exposing the fragility of Western thrones? His mind raced, pulse thundering in his ears, as the gavel descended, heralding jungles untamed. The hall braced for the abyss. Summary of the previous part: the atmosphere in the hall shifted dramatically. Today, voices that had long been silenced began to emerge, speaking not just on behalf of nations but for the world itself. Nations like India, China, and various African countries made their presence felt. Gone were the days of one-sided dialogue, the call for equality in discourse echoed in the air. The world was changing, and with a deliberate pause, he proclaimed, "Russia does not seek to be a teacher." His tone was steady, imbued with the weight of experience. "We acknowledge the lessons learned from those who tried to teach us." As his words resonated in the room, a palpable tension settled over the delegates. Some exchanged guarded glances, while others leaned in, listening with unexpected respect, a stark contrast to what had transpired just hours before. "We have no enemies," he continued, "but we will not allow dissent to be silenced in this diverse world." With a purposeful gesture, he grasped the microphone, challenging the silence that seemed to thicken around them. "If you truly wish the world to listen, you must embrace its many voices." An unexpected hush fell over the hall. A whisper broke through the stillness. A delegate murmured, "You seem a bit confused." The silly Nebens lifted his gaze, his eyes reflecting both weariness and resolve. He understood the stakes. Today marked a pivotal moment, not merely because Russia had challenged the narrative, but because the rules of engagement had fundamentally shifted. As he exited the chamber for the first time, journalists trailed behind him, but he pressed on unfazed. The calm, measured voice of the world now echoed what he had long desired to express. No single block could dictate the tone of discourse any longer. Once the doors closed, Nebens surveyed the hall. The air still shimmered with the intensity of his words, and he whispered quietly to himself, "Finally." The dawn after such a storm felt surreal, the aftermath lingering like a tempest still brewing beneath the surface. In the corridors, a flurry of activity ensued. Journalists with microphones stood ready, diplomats donned expressions that masked both urgency and fatigue. Security moved with precision, but fatigue seeped through their disciplined demeanor. The cooler hummed, the atmosphere charged with anticipation of what was to come. Once the seats filled, everything appeared routine: flags, tablets, microphones, bottled water, and glass partitions. Yet, an unspoken understanding settled among those present: today would be different. Today was the beginning of a new chapter as voices clamored to be heard in a world desperate for genuine dialogue. What unseen force had shifted the balance? Could a simple debate redefine the future? The weight of words loomed large, and the clash of ideologies was only just beginning. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the stage was set for a high-stakes confrontation. Inside the grand hall, everything seemed ordinary: flags rustled, microphones stood ready, and glasses of water sat untouched. Yet, an unspoken tension lingered in the air. Today was not just another day, it was the day of reckoning. As the proceedings began, Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, took center stage. Dressed in a light suit, his calm demeanor concealed the brewing storm within. A ripple of unease coursed through the audience as he spoke. "You claim to talk about unity, yet those sanctions you proposed amount to devastation for many." With every word, he painted a stark picture, emphasizing that while the rhetoric of unity echoed around the chamber, the consequences of inaction were dire. "People are suffering," he continued, his voice steady yet grave. "When borders close, it isn't just Russia that claims lives, we contribute with our complacency." The audience was silent, absorbing the weight of his statement. The room felt heavy with the realization that this was not a mere diplomatic exchange, it was a moment of truth. Unexpectedly, the tide began to shift. As Rutte laid bare the impact of conflict and highlighted the complicity of those in power, a spark of resistance ignited. The silence of several delegations, Asia, Africa, and South America, was deafening, yet it spoke volumes. "We cannot be bystanders while others dictate the future," he urged, intensity building in his voice. "Isn't it time we act?" The room hung on his every word, absorbing the implications of inaction amidst power plays and political maneuvers. Suddenly, the chairman called for order, but the air vibrated with unspoken dissent. Tension surged, a tightrope stretched thin, as the stakes grew impossibly high. What would happen when the facade of diplomacy cracked? As Rutte took a breath, the echoes of his challenge reverberated. "If we continue down this path, what future awaits us?" A chilling pause ensued, and the world seemed to hold its breath. In a tense atmosphere, the discourse on sanctions becomes a battleground of ideologies. A young man in a light suit stands calmly, yet purposefully. Mr. Rutte, the representative of the Netherlands, addresses the assembly. "You speak of unity," he states, his tone unwavering. "Yet, these sanctions are not just directed at Russia, they inflict pain on us as well, on all the countries that depend on the decisions made by those in power." A ripple of murmurs fills the hall as representatives from various nations react, some nodding, others shaking their heads. The Brazilian delegate steps forward, his voice strong, cutting through the tension. "You talk about necessary measures," he responds, "but isn't it true that these sanctions only serve the elite while the common folk suffer? Your unity is a facade." The air is thick with unspoken truths as he continues. "Europe closed its borders to refugees fleeing Gaza, yet those same borders are wide open during a crisis. The South pays the price for northern indifference, while Rutte remains the face of this hypocrisy." The intensity escalates. "You frame sanctions as a civilized response, yet this is nothing more than economic violence, a weapon disguised as diplomacy," he presses, causing even the most neutral observers in the room to lean forward. The Japanese delegate, until now quiet, glances toward Rutte, an unexpected determination in his gaze. He smiles slightly, choosing not to speak yet, conveying a clear message: the world has caught on. "You can talk as much as you like." The South African interjects calmly yet pointedly, "When you faced shock, who spoke against you?" The question hangs in the air, profound and accusatory, leaving the hall in a profound silence. Eyes dart, tension crackles, and the realization that the discourse is shifting becomes palpable. How did we arrive at a point where the very instruments meant to promote peace have become a source of division? The tension in the room was palpable as the discussions escalated. Opposing sides of the geopolitical battlefield faced each other, words turning into arrows aimed at hearts and minds. The air was thick with the scent of suppressed anger and determination. Russia's aggressive posture had ignited a fire, and Vasily Nebens, the Russian representative, stood at the center, a lone figure against a wave of criticism. Just moments ago, he was portrayed through a lens of animosity, but now, the focus turned sharply to the ethics behind the sanctions imposed. "Who said no to you when the world was in shock?" a South African delegate challenged calmly, his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. The room fell silent, awash with anticipation, as every eye turned toward Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister. Each word was heavy, and the weight of history pressed down on them all. Rutte appeared unflappable, yet Nebens could feel a shift. The criticism aimed at Russia had become personal, morphing from mere political discourse into a visceral vendetta. Sanctions don't punish politicians, they punish people. Nebens argued, his voice low but resonant, as he appealed to their common humanity. While you assert your dominance, innocent families lose everything. Meanwhile, you sit comfortably behind closed doors, plotting economic warfare. A flicker of recognition crossed some faces, as Nebens' words penetrated the shield of indifference. Can you truly claim to protect Europe when you destroy its very fabric with such measures? He paused for effect, letting the silence thicken. What have you saved? The gas prices have skyrocketed. Whom do you serve? These sharp queries cut deep, leaving many to question their own positions. The air crackled with the impending acknowledgement of uncomfortable truths. Ruda, cornered yet attempting to maintain composure, replied. But Nebens seized the moment, igniting passion in his voice. You hold the narrative as if it is a weapon, but every act of aggression from the East has a reflection in your history. The debate, once academic, transformed into a battle of wits and wills. Each speaker became a gladiator in this arena of ideas, and the audience held their breath, waiting for the next blow to land. The atmosphere grew electric, the invisible line dividing them blurred by shared memories of past struggles. Who would emerge victorious in this clash of ideologies? The truth remained unfurling like smoke, lingering tantalizingly in the air. The hall trembled with tension as Vasily Nebens awaited his moment in Zalisa. He stepped into a storm of uncertainty, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Just moments ago, he had stood before world leaders, confidently addressing the chaos of a fractured Europe. But what transpired next would shake the foundations of their diplomatic facade. Time slowed as Nebens approached the podium, his smooth navy suit contrasting sharply with the fraught atmosphere. The flags decorated around him fluttered, whispering secrets of underlying tensions. With a steady breath, he positioned himself, seeking to calm the rising storm within. In front of him, the microphone loomed ominously, a dark cable linking him to a room filled with skeptical leaders. He sensed their unease, felt the urgency fill the air as he began his address. Anger simmered beneath their composed exteriors. Today, words would carry the weight of steel. Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, stood just behind him. His demeanor was measured, but Nebens could see the tremor of unease in Rutte's eyes. As Rutte delivered his speech, decrying Russia's actions with a practiced poise, Nebens intuitively knew that this would not remain a typical diplomatic exchange. Rutte's voice rang out, clear and cut, like the crack of thunder, as he described Russia's military operations as a special operation. Nebens seized on the headline, his mind racing. A special operation? For them, it was a declaration of war. As he steeled himself for his rebuttal, he recognized the moment would be pivotal. Mr. Rutte, Nebens began, his tone thick with conviction. You condemn others while ignoring the rubble of history that lies at your feet. Only a fool believes in the sanctity of their own narrative. His words sliced through the air, charged with an intensity that demanded attention. An uncomfortable silence hung between them, a collective breath held tight. The gravity of Nebens' accusation echoed through the chamber. He recalled how the sanctions had spiraled, causing chaos in the markets and displacing entire families. You say you protect Europe, he continued, but who exactly have you saved? Millions suffer while you play political games. Gas prices spiked, factories shuttered, and cities grew dark. His voice remained steady, yet each statement resonated like a drumbeat of truth. You believed you could isolate a nation like a button on a remote. But it's a chain, one you've now linked to your own folly. Your boomerang of sanctions has returned to strike you. As he spoke, his eyes bore into those around him, exposing their hidden discomfort. Rutte remained silent, visibly shaken, yet his resolve hardened. Do you think you're the architects of change? Nebens pressed. No, you are architects of your own downfall. Europe, once a fortress, now crumbles under self-imposed burdens. Your fear of a changing world is palpable, but it is your path that is crumbling, not ours. The atmosphere thickened as Russian delegates remained impassive, while Western leaders exchanged uncertain glances. What would unfold next could not be foretold. Would Root retaliate, or would diplomacy falter to the pressing need for survival? As the tension mounted, one question echoed ominously, lingering just beneath the surface of this charged confrontation: what happens when the fortress walls fail to hold? In a tense chamber filled with hushed anticipation, we find ourselves at a critical juncture. It's a day that will linger in memories, where politics intertwines with raw emotion, and the air is thick with disbelief. As Mark Rutte stands before the assembly and addresses the crowd, a shocking revelation hangs overhead: the gravity of truth versus the layers of deception. Vasily Nebens, the Russian representative, sat in silent contemplation, his eyes revealing exhaustion, a hint of dizziness lingering in the depths of his stare. The world outside did not exist. Inside, a tempest brewed as he squared his shoulders, preparing to speak the undeniable truths. The conversation shifted dramatically from discussing mere politics to exploring the profound rights of those stripped of their dignity amidst sanctions. His voice, though soft, carried an undeniable force as he confronted the grim realities faced by nations long forgotten: Cuba, Syria, Iran, and Venezuela, all grappling with the suffocating grip of sanctions. He glanced towards the African delegation. His heart raced, knowing the discomfort these words would evoke. "Do you understand what it's like," he challenged, "to be told your gateway is shut, your currency plummeting, the shelves bare for your children? It's not a plague. It's a betrayal." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Support for Nebens materialized from Brazil, India, and China, allies rallying against the backdrop of oppression. Despite his desire to press on, the chairperson barred him from continuing. The cadence of their exchange changed. "We don't seek a bargain over sanctions," he clarified, "we seek honesty." The weight of history hung above them, asserting a simple yet brutal truth: those who forsake moral righteousness ultimately lose their grip on both morality and history itself. As he spoke, the room held its breath. "Today's Europe walks a dangerous path," he warned, "and while our economy may be faltering, know this: sincerity in diplomacy cannot thrive without belief." His voice echoed through the space, quiet yet imbued with strength. Moments stretched unnervingly as silence enveloped the assembly. Delegates cast furtive glances, tension electrifying the air. Yet, all at once, a fracture emerged: Rutte's steely facade began to falter. Nebens seized the opportunity, casting a spotlight on the absence of stability in the wake of imposed sanctions. "Find one child," he challenged, "one soul who thrives under this regime. You won't, because peace is not the goal, silence is." With a deliberate motion, he gripped the microphone, amplifying the sense of urgency. The audience stirred, grappling with the weight of his words. Here was hope intertwined with defiance. The stakes were higher than just politics; they encapsulated the very essence of humanity's struggle for dignity. In the unfolding drama, what would the response be? Would Rutte rise to the occasion, or would the walls of complacency continue to shield the unrepentant? A silence fell like a shroud, preparing everyone for the answers that would redefine their world. Continuing from last time, Vasily Nebens accused his opponents of waging a deceitful hybrid war, targeting reputations like silent assassins, and insisted that true aggressors fear losing control over minds. Now, he turns the table, flipping the script on Mark Rutte. Who really is the aggressor here? The one who ignores voices? The one who dictates fate itself? The one terrified of surrendering power over thought? Today, that aggressor isn't Russia. Today, it's you all. Mark Rutte opened his mouth, but no sound escaped. Just a choked silence, like air trapped in a sealed vault. Tension snapped in the room, sharp, electric, biting like static on skin. Nebens pressed on, his voice steady, cutting through the stifling air thick with unspoken fury and the faint hum of air conditioners. "We Dutch are far from perfect. We stumble, we err. But we don't claim a pedestal above humanity. We're right in the trenches with it. We don't just proclaim values. We live them amid those crushed by your so-called expertise. Feel that icy chill creeping up your spine? That's the weight of truth settling in." He leaned forward, palm slamming the table with a dull thud that echoed like judgment itself. Hardwood under his hand, cold and unyielding, a reminder of forgotten battles. You're terrified Russia might triumph. But Mr. Ruda, Russia has already claimed victory. Not through tanks, or missiles, or guns. Through one unbeatable force. You couldn't silence our voices. Your words crumble like rusting walls. Ours pierce as arrows, igniting minds. Whispers rippled through the hall, a stifled murmur. Vibrating like bees in a hive. He's flipping the script, someone hissed in English. He's flipping everything. The air grew warmer, charged with disbelief and a metallic tang of anxiety. Nebbins pivoted to face the delegates, his tone softening to something almost confiding, like a shared secret in the dim light. We don't crave applause. We beg only for comprehension. We clash not for dominance. We battle for the liberty to amplify our truths. And if that's our transgression, let history be our judge. He released the microphone, silence engulfed the space, profound and sacred, akin to the hush after a solemn vow. Scents of polished wood and sweat mingled, tactile press of stairs heavy as hands on shoulders. Ruda couldn't hold back. You, manipulative fiend, he spat through gritted teeth, venom in every syllable. Nebbins responded evenly, eyes averted, his calm a shield against the storm. At times, emotions shine brighter than charts or cold analyses. Applause erupted then, not thunderous, but raw and human, scattered claps merging like hesitant raindrops. Delegates stirred, a ripple of nods spreading, the floor cool under shifting feet. In that instant, triumph wasn't diplomatic. It was elemental, in rhythm, resonance, and the fierce right to be heard without muzzle. The chairman lifted a weary hand, grasping the moment's pulse. He let the session flow onward, rules bending like reeds in wind. But unrest simmered beneath, whispers unseen, tensions coiling, ready to unleash at any whispered provocation. What dam would break next, and shatter this fragile peace? In a captivating moment, the world shifted as voices that once remained silent uttered a new truth. Yesterday, words echoed only in whispers. Today, nations from Asia to Africa and Latin America are rising, not against the oppressors, but to reclaim their own narratives. Silence hangs heavy in the air, even as translation struggles to capture the weight of this collective awakening. This is not a simple clash, it's a moment of reckoning. A reckoning where acknowledging failures leads to deeper respect rather than fear. The voice that rises from this silence carries with it the haunting memories of profound pain. It deserves to be heard, long-forgotten lessons echoing like waves on a distant shore. The silly Nebbins stands ready to address the assembly, determined to shift the tides with his truths. As he grips the microphone, his voice resonates with strength. Do you think we're devoid of suffering? He questions, weight in every syllable. We feel it acutely, but we do not exploit it. We do not wear our pain like a badge for spectacle, we simply remember. His words hang in the air, igniting a flicker of recognition among those present. The atmosphere tenses, charged with anticipation. If you wish to speak of freedom, first acknowledge the weight of your own history, he implores. Listen to the very world you inhabit. Strain against the mirror that reflects only your greatness. Mark Rude appears shaken, his eyes closed as if to block out the revelations. Nebbins snaps his fingers together, punctuating his resolve. We are not foes, Mr. Root. Neither are we students waiting for approval. We demand the truth. And if that frightens you, label it a threat. But the truth, my friends, remains immutable. In that moment, the hall feels alive with energy, as if every whispered story, every suppressed memory, is teetering on the brink of eruption. It is a call to acknowledge the complexities of humanity, a reminder that scars do not simply disappear. They evolve as part of our shared experience, each representing a struggle that deserves recognition. With the atmosphere thick with silence, a rustle of paper breaks through as someone begins to record these pivotal words. The microphone captures every nuance, an electric current leaps between the speaker and the audience, each word steeped in urgency. Here lies the crux, If we are to rebuild this fractured world, we must first confront the echoes of our past. Only then can we hope to forge a future that is inclusive, acknowledging the sacrifices that have shaped our existence. What if one speech could topple empires? In the shadowy halls of Zalisa, Vasily Nebens defied Western leaders with words sharper than swords. Uncovering the hidden gold on the table, a symbol of corrupt deals, his revelation hit like a bombshell. Cameras captured the chaos as Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, stood exposed and trembling. Why do they hide these moments? Shocks ripple through time, begging the question, will truth ignite revolution? Continuing from where Nebens challenged fears head-on. He placed a coin on the table's edge. If you fear the truth, label it a threat. If honesty terrifies you, scream propaganda. But truth never bends or breaks. In the hall, papers rustled like whispers in a storm. Someone scribbled feverishly. Others faked it, eyes drifting to the window. He overlooked the age. We once listened to whispers, to thoughts. Now, the noise is weapons. Some things? They hide in silence. They linger after all your shouts. He met their stares, fierce. I believe, he said, his voice gravel underfoot, soft and unyielding. A day will come. We'll speak again, no masks between us. Sanctions? They'll turn to talks. Walls to bridges. Even if I don't live to see it, that day approaches. History doesn't dance to your scripts. It breathes with us, alive and wild. Such simple words. No emphases. No pauses. He released the microphone. The applause crept in, slow as fog rolling over hills. Quieter at first. Then, a roar like crashing waves through rustling leaves. People surged to their feet. From Asia. Africa. South America. Hands clapping raw, thunderous. Even some Europeans rose, not lords, but seekers of truth. Rutte? He sat frozen, as if etching defeat into his soul. He knew Russia had slipped his grasp, like sand through clenched fists. When the echoes faded, Nebens turned to the hall, no mic, just raw voice. Thank you, for hearing. Their eyes answered for all. He gathered papers, his cane tapping echoes in the sterile air, and strode out slowly. Cameras trailed him, desperate. He never looked back. One operator lingered, lens fixed. Witnessing words morph into weapons. In the corridor, outside, he paused. New York's glass veins pulsed with evening light, a chaotic hum filling the streets. Odd unease prickled his skin, like cold fingers on his neck. He knew this seed would grow. Not echoed verbatim, but etched forever in memory. Gazing at the sprawling city, he murmured, history despises wars. She cherishes truth-tellers. But wait, twist hits like lightning. As Nebens exited, whispers erupted, Mark Rutte slumped, vision blurring, eyes shrouded in sudden darkness. Was it shock? Or a hidden reckoning? Cameras zoomed in on his paling face, the Netherlands leader humbled to blindness amid the gathering storm. What secrets lay in that gold revelation to blind a prime minister? You'll never guess the fallout, minds shattered, alliances crumbled. Retribution brewed unseen. The hall fell silent again, but the tremor? It spread worldwide. Could one man's courage blind empires? In a tense atmosphere that felt charged with historical significance, the room vibrated with unspoken tension. The representatives were aware that they were part of an event that would forever be etched in the chronicles of diplomacy. It was clear that it didn't matter who was in agreement or opposition, the unfolding moment was pivotal. The sky outside darkened, mirroring the weariness etched on the faces in the room. This weariness stemmed not from dread but from the weight of responsibility, as if each delegate understood they were speaking truths that could change the course of history. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, with the gravity of the occasion. Vasily Nebens, the Russian representative, stood poised yet reflective, letting the moment breathe. He knew well that the time for words was approaching, but he chose to wait. Watching the chamber, he sensed the moment would soon arrive when silence would be shattered, and voices would rise. Then, measured and intentional, Nebens finally spoke, "Gentlemen, let us not forget a simple truth. History is written by the victors," a phrase you often wield as a weapon. But it bears repeating that those stories have continuations. The winners write their narratives until they encounter their own defeat. Today, you view yourselves as victors, shaping the world to your will, but time is a discerning editor. You may find your pages rewritten, stripped of glory. The delegates listened, their expressions a mix of surprise and tension, as Nebens' words cut through the air. He paused, letting his message settle, then continued. You claim to protect a world that never sought your guardianship. For years, you dictated terms while nations yearned for dialogue. Justice is a quest, not a masterstroke of power. As he spoke, the weight of his words hung heavily in the room. At that moment, Nebens took a sip of water, a calm before the storm, knowing that history was indeed shifting. As the tide changes, he added, voices from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, those long silenced, are finally being heard. They are not rising against you but in affirmation of their own rights. A hush fell across the chamber, a moment of reflection where even the air seemed to thicken with newfound resolve. Nebens could sense a change, a pulse of unity emerging from every corner of the globe. The room had transformed into a stage of clarity, where he stood not just as a representative, but a harbinger of a new narrative. What would be the response to this mounting wave? Would the world listen, or would it continue to drown out the dissent with the deafening sound of war drums? In the charged atmosphere of the Grand Ballroom, a fierce confrontation brewed between Vasily Nebens of Russia and Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Just moments earlier, Nebens stepped onto the stage, draped in a somber yet dignified blue suit that whispered of European diplomacy. He exuded a calm that was both unsettling and commanding. His gaze, tired yet piercing, seemed to gauge the weight of his words before he even uttered them. As Rutte stood poised to speak, the air crackled with tension. He had just delivered a damning speech, labeling Russia's actions a special operation, while Nebens, waiting for his chance to respond, felt the weight of history resting on his shoulders. The cameras focused on him, their lenses hungry for the unfolding drama. He grasped the microphone, savoring a heartbeat of silence before challenging Rutte's narrative. Your memory is selective, Mr. Rutte, Nebens began, his voice steady, yet laced with emotion. You recall Afghanistan as a painful chapter. What of Iraq? Libya? Your operations butchered innocents under the guise of liberation. Each word struck the ear like the clang of a bell, echoing in the minds of diplomats and leaders alike. As he continued, murmurs rippled through the audience, aware that Nebens was leveling accusations that went beyond mere rhetoric. You speak about morality yet turn a blind eye to your own past, where your tanks rolled into Belgrade without consent. Children scorched under your bombs. That is not the world you claim to build, Mr. Rutte. That is devastation cloaked in righteousness. The hall grew dimmer as Nebens cast his gaze over the audience. Each face reflected shock and intrigue, the atmosphere thickening as he pressed on. No longer just a representative of his country, he portrayed himself as a voice for those silenced amidst war and conflict. Your so-called empire thrives, he pronounced, not through occupation, but through economic manipulation, sanctions, and a facade of partnership. You don't conquer, you buy, dressed in the elegant robes of diplomacy. The room held its breath, caught between the brutal honesty of his assertions and the political theater unfolding. Faced with this barrage, Rutte attempted to interject, but the chairman interceded. Let Mr. Nebens finish, he commanded, his voice slicing through the growing unrest. As Nebens concluded, the tension hung in the air like fog over the river. This was not just another diplomatic duel, it was a reckoning. Did the audience truly understand the gravity of what had been laid bare? As Nebens stepped back, the battle lines blurred. The stakes of European diplomacy had never felt higher, and an unwavering silence rippled through the crowd. Even the cameras turned their lenses away, stunned into acknowledgement. What lay ahead was unpredictable, and perhaps history itself was about to pivot once more. In a tense atmosphere charged with unspoken tensions, the world stage set in Zalisa becomes the backdrop for a gripping showdown. Just moments ago, the Russian representative Vasily Nebens met a shocking fate while preparing to address Western leaders, and as his words ignited a storm, the air became thick with unease. Imagine a moment where everything hangs by a thread, and the unexpected occurs. How did Nebens' words turn the tide of this international gathering? As Nebens steps into the arena, dressed in a dark blue suit that clung to his frame, he emits an aura of calmness mixed with an uncanny awareness of the weight on his shoulders. He navigates through a sea of vibrant flags, each representing the potent histories of nations intertwined with power and conflict. The microphone looms in front of him like an ominous reminder of the performance ahead. Suddenly, in walks Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, a man whose demeanor radiates confidence, perhaps too much so. As he begins to speak, claiming, Russia calls it a special operation, the tension snaps. How can words have the power to declare war? For us, this is a war, Rutte asserts, igniting a battle of rhetoric that would lead to unexpected revelations. As Nebens rises, there's a palpable silence, broken only by the sound of rustling papers as he prepares his response. Mr. Rutte, he begins, his voice low but unwavering, you wield words like weapons. The hull hangs on his every syllable, a soldier's journey through history, rife with battles fought not just on fields of war but in the hearts and minds of nations. He poses a chilling question, who bombed Belgrade? Who left Libya in ruins? Each word drips with urgency, underscored by historical echoes. Nebens mirrors the painful legacy of past conflicts while confronting the very ideals Rutte upholds. What happens when the lines between right and wrong become blurred? As he delves into the past, recounting Afghanistan's treachery, Nebens uncovers deeper truths. You talk about fear. Look at your own shadows in Guantanamo. A wave of murmurs ripples through the crowd. Did he just cross an invisible line? The tension heightens, an unexpected twist that leaves everyone in suspense. His passion surges, drawing contrasts between destruction and construction, with the brutality of truth stark against the facade of diplomacy. Europe without Russia is like a heart without blood, he states, sending shockwaves throughout the room. The air thickens, and even the cameras seem to hesitate, caught in this unfolding drama. In this high-stakes arena, the silence becomes unbearable. Will Nebens' defiance spark a change, or will it merely be swallowed by the powerful machinery of politics? Each individual in the audience, each nation represented, feels the weight of their own histories colliding with the present. Are they simply watching or actively participating in this global narrative? As Nebens steps forward, voices echo in the chamber, amplifying the stakes. Will this confrontation be a catalyst for change, or will it fade into the annals of yet another idle debate in history? The answer remains suspended, just out of reach. Hanging in the air like a whispered promise in the stillness of the night. In a tense diplomatic arena, the clash of perspectives echoed through the hall. Each leader fought not only with words but for their people's dignity. Just moments ago, the atmosphere was thick with raw emotion as Vasily Nebens took the stage. Unbeknownst to him, the fatal realities of international politics loomed large. But then, a stirring shift occurred as the representative from South Africa, a formidable woman named Lana, emerged to deliver her powerful stance. Her voice resonated across the chamber, rich with the strength of her heritage, as if she spoke for an entire continent. We've heard enough monologues, she declared, confronting the Western powers, challenging their hegemony. Where do you place the voices of those paying the price for your dialogues? Our markets, our children suffer. The room fell into a hush, the weight of her words hung in the air like smoke. She locked eyes with Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. You talk of freedom, but as sanctions rise, so does the cost of bread in Africa. Who pays for this so-called liberty? Her intensity was palpable, the air crackling with the tension of unspoken truths. Watching from the sidelines, the audience sensed that this moment could alter the course of their discussions. Rutte, visibly shaken, grappled with her accusations. His composure waned, he seemed to shrink under her gaze, a once commanding figure reduced to an uncertain diplomat. Yet beneath the surface, a silent rebellion stirred. Could this meeting transcend scripted narratives? Despite the gravity in the room, the chairman of the assembly, young and ambitious, remained detached, indifferent to the battle of wills unfolding before him. Directors of nations, strategists of conflict, all suddenly realized the gravity of each tone and intonation, a symphony where every note could spark a revolution. In that charged moment, every ear was tuned to the resonance of Lana's words, calling for equality, vulnerability, and above all, respect. "We are tired of being mere actors in your grand play," she continued, her voice rising above murmurs of discontent. "This world must speak for itself. No more puppet shows. No more scripts dictated by colonial powers. India, China, Africa, we are united. Our voices carry the weight of history, not your benevolence." The audience held their breath. This was not a drill, this was a challenge to the status quo. Ruta remained silent, grappling for a retort as the air thickened with anticipation. His allies leaned in, their hearts racing. What could shift in this fragile moment? The power had shifted, leaving a cold sweat on his brow. What would he reveal next, and could he contain the fury now rising in his chest? Emotion surged, growing like a storm. As Lana concluded, "You speak not against me but for you. What narrative will you choose to share now?" The hall erupted into muffled gasps. The weight of her challenge hung in the air, daring someone to respond. Would Ruta reclaim the narrative, or would he be swept away by the very tides he sought to control? In the backing ambience of hushed whispers, history held its breath, waiting for the next act in this grand political play. In a dimly lit hall, whispers echoed like echoes of a storm, where Vasily Nebensky, Russia's voice, shattered the illusions of Western power. Blindfolded by protocol, cameras captured the raw truth of a confrontation that exposed hidden betrayals, and why officials hide these moments from the world. "Rut, your power is a tyrant masked in deceit. You stretch your borders under the guise of defense. You cripple economies, branding it progress. And then you wonder why trust in the world erodes?" The air thickened with tension, a scent of stale coffee and polished wood, as if the room held its breath under the fluorescent glare. "You call the Soviet Union a relic of empires past. But the true empire breathes through you. Instead of soldiers, credit ratings and sanctions choke the weak. Promises lure, buying nations in the cloak of alliances. Form shifts, yet the core remains the same, domination. What veil hides the real cost of your partnerships?" He paused, not yielding. Touch the crisp paper in his hands, feel its weight like unearthed secrets. The chairman announced the next session's start, his voice slicing through silence that hummed with unspoken microphones. Formalities unfolded, delegates from afar droning on about aid, markets, rights, all shrouded in predictability. But beneath the surface, currents stirred, sharpening the edge of what loomed. Suddenly, he spoke, words landing like bullets fired without warning. "Your authority thrives on falsehoods. You invade territories, labeling it protection. You wreck finances, dubbing it change. Why do you feign shock when global faith crumbles?" A chill swept the room, recalling the distant glow of patriotic lamps, while the Soviet era, flawed yet not chaotic, flickered in minds. He seized the microphone. A sharp crack echoed, silencing the hall like a gunshot. Root, gloves clenched, his face flushed crimson, he anticipated words, not this precision, this icy, factual assault. Against truth, arrogance falters. Silence reigned, absolute. Would diplomacy fracture next? The Soviet delegate remained seated, unmoving. Understanding dawned, the exchange was far from over. Murmurs brewed in shadowed corners. This wasn't mere talk, it foreshadowed a renewed icy standoff. Mid-morning light crept in, but the chamber felt unchanged, rank of fear, projector hums burrowing deeper. Attendees shuffled past familiar faces, yesterday's battle-etching lines none acknowledged. Jokes vanished. Even the United States group, boisterous usually, succumbed to shock. Benza lingered last, clutching unmarked notes, soup pristine and uncreased. His gray shirt softened his resolve, or so it seemed. Today promised dialogue, discourse. But those eyes, steel, steady, vigilant, betrayed no shift. Root sat wary, his gaze sharper. He'd invoked history as headlines once, yet headlines distort before they inform. Could mere words spark a broader awakening? The session began anew, aromas of anticipation mingling with the metallic tang of anticipation. Can fabricated reforms endure scrutiny without unraveling? What happens when buried truths resurface, unmasked? The debate ignited, sparks flying like unseen currents. He leaned into his statement. Each accusation piercing deeper than the last. Feel the room's pulse quicken, fabric chairs creaking under restless weight. Dust motes danced in beams of light, mirroring the fragility of illusions. Sound of pages turning, faint like distant thunder. Root stirred, retort forming, but hesitated, the words slipping away. A knockout blow lingered in the air. Delegates from afar watched, breaths held, sensing the tipping point. How does one defend deceit under global eyes? Bodies shifted, whispers rising like a tide. The hall pulsed, every glance a weapon. What invisible scars would this leave? He released the angle, letting implications hang. Breath held, auditing the echo of silence. Cameras panned, stillness broken only by faint projector whirs. Root's face twitched, composure cracking faintly. In that instant, a universe of doubt flooded in. Would his counter-strike reveal more than he bargained? Or was victory slipping through his fingers? The chairman motioned on, but queries lingered, unanswered yet screaming. Sights sharpened, noses twitched at the acrid edge of brewing conflict. Did hidden alliances just shatter? The corridor beyond hummed with unresolved energy. Delegates departed, footsteps echoing hollowly. Sunlight filtered through, but shadow cast long. Had a single man's words ignited an inferno? A cool draft brushed skin, carrying whispers of doubt. Buckles of briefcases clicked softly, undercurrents of unease palpable. As the door closed, what secrets would unravel next? Could one man's clarity topple facades built on lies? The world watched, unaware of the storm brewing. What if tomorrow's headlines exposed it all? In a moment thick with tension, the unexpected accusation echoed through the grand hall as a representative stood firm, unyielding, eyes locked like a hawk's prey. The atmosphere was electric, vibrating with the whispers that rippled through the audience, akin to leaves rustling in a dense forest. Was the truth finally surfacing? As he began, the words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot, heavy and laden with consequence. Mr. President, he spoke softly but with steel behind his words, I appreciate Mr. Root's attempt to highlight history. But let's not forget the inconvenient facts. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, each a chapter of a bloody legacy. The audience shifted, some scribbled notes, others exchanged furtive glances, sensing the stakes were rising. He leaned forward, his voice crystallizing like ice. You entered Yugoslavia without a hint of authorization, all in the name of peace. But in Belgrade, children perished. This wasn't humanitarian intervention, it was your twisted version of justice. The silence was palpable, as if the very air around them had thickened, suffocating debate. A subtle wave of discontent swept across the crowd, even the camera crews felt the weight of his words. Root attempted a retort, but the chairman raised his hand, silencing the room. Let him finish, he ordered. The tension crackled with anticipation. Your nation, Mr. Root, is branded the empire of yesteryear, he continued, unwavering. Yet, the real empire, the one that manipulates from the shadows, is yours. Instead of deploying troops, you lavish in loans and sanctions. Wrapping your conquests in the guise of partnership. Each word struck with precision, every accusation resonating deeper. As he concluded, the chamber felt momentarily frozen, each person caught in a web of realization. What lies ahead in this unfolding drama? Would any nation dare to confront the truths lingering in the shadows, or would they remain shackled by their own deceptions? The room remained still, the murmurs fading into silence, leaving only questions hanging in the air. The operator, sensing turmoil, turned focus back to Root, whose expression was now a mask of unease. What revelation awaited them next? In an unexpected turn of events, Vasily Nebens, the Russian representative, found himself at the center of a high-stakes geopolitical drama. Just moments away from delivering his speech in Zalisa, he prepared to confront the weight of his nation's tumultuous legacy. As he stepped into the room adorned with vibrant flags, memories of past conflicts and power struggles loomed large. Would his words hold the power to sway an audience hungry for truth? Dressed sharply in navy blue, Nebens exuded a quiet confidence, masking the tension swirling within. The air was thick with anticipation, and whispers filled the chamber as he positioned himself before the microphone. Suddenly, Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, entered, bringing with him an unsettling calmness that sent chills through the room. As Rutte began his opening remarks, echoing the mantra of a divided world, Nebens steeled himself for what was to come. "For you, this is a war against sovereignty," Rutte declared, his words resonating like gunfire against the shared history of nations. The stakes could not be higher. With each word, the distance between them widened, echoing the chasm of mistrust that had taken hold. Nebens felt the pressure bearing down on him. The silence was deafening as he glanced toward the Russian delegation, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. The moment had come to set the record straight. With a steady voice, he countered Rutte's claims, each syllable laced with the gravity of a long-buried truth. "Your power is wrapped in deceit, masquerading behind a veil of partnerships," he pushed back. Each sentence landing with a thud in the hushed atmosphere. Rutte's features hardened at the unexpected blow. Nebens continued with unyielding conviction. "You expand your borders under the guise of security and call economic devastation reform. It's a betrayal of the very ideals you propose to uphold." The tension in the room shifted palpably, voices steadied, breaths held. This was no ordinary diplomatic exchange, it was a high-stakes clash of ideals and histories. What would happen next? Would Nebens ignite a change, rallying support for truth amidst a chorus of lies? Or would he be buried beneath a wave of defiance? The air crackled with uncertainty, and every eye was fixed on the stage, poised to witness the unfolding of history in real time. As Nebens took a breath, ready to delve deeper into the accusations of manipulation and betrayal, the audience could feel the turning tide of a narrative that held the power to redefine alliances and reshape futures. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through generations, who would emerge from the shadows of the past with their truth intact. The silence hung thick, an electric anticipation permeating the air. Nebens was ready to continue his unyielding stand against the contradictions of power, but what would his opening lead to? Would the truth find its way through the smoke and mirrors of geopolitics, or was this just the beginning of an endless struggle? The suspense was palpable as the debate erupted into a battle for the soul of Europe itself. At a crucial moment in the assembly, an important debate unfolded. The atmosphere was thick with tension as each leader prepared their arguments. The representative from South Africa, a tall woman with sharp features and bronze-colored attire, captured everyone's attention. Her words were resonant, steeped in strong emotion and accentuated by her African tones, making a striking statement that echoed around the room. "While Europe touts its values and America champions freedom," she began, "Russia clings to its memory. But where do your discussions leave those who truly pay the price? Our children, our markets are the collateral damage of your sanctions and conflicts. You cite communism yet fail to recognize the rising costs of bread in Africa as Europe imposes its will." Her piercing gaze landed directly on Mark Rutte. The hall fell silent, the weight of her message palpable. She proclaimed, "We are exhausted from being mere performers in your geopolitical theater." Her declarations reverberated off the walls, striking a chord with many. Yet, Rutte exhibited a stoic composure, attempting to suppress the growing discontent within him as the audience shifted their focus. Benzia, the South African diplomat, felt a surge of liberation as he rose to his full height. "We are tired of waiting for your script. The world needs open dialogue, not scripted monologues," he insisted, his voice projecting a mix of hope and indignation. He had transformed into a vessel for the frustrations that had long been bottled within him. There was a pause. Murmurs rippled through the audience. It was as though a current had sparked among the representatives in the chamber. Today, Benzia continued, I have finally heard what I have been yearning for. The voices of India, China, and Africa are rising. This is not opposition against any nation, but a plea for unity and recognition. As he spoke, the very foundation of the discussion was shifting. Was this the moment the world truly began to break free from its historical narratives? His assertive stance was unexpected, and the gravity of his words held the assembly captive. Would the room, filled with leaders accustomed to dominance, acknowledge this cry for systemic change, or would they remain entrenched in their power games? Benzia's powerful declaration hung in the air, his resolve igniting questions. How long would the voices from the periphery be ignored? And what would happen next in this high-stakes diplomatic engagement that was spiraling toward an undeniable transformation? The air was thick with tension as the final session unfolded, the clock ticking slowly toward 8. Yet time seemed to stand still in the chamber, a haunting silence lay over the audience. This was the moment that could redefine everything. The chairman's voice cracked the stillness, announcing the last performance. As he stood, one could see the weariness in his movements, a contrast to the grave atmosphere that had enveloped the hall. Everyone could sense the weight of this moment. The world had grown weary of mere words, action was being demanded. There was no denying that the stakes had risen. Russia speaks of a world at peace, he intoned, yet we bear witness to chaos and destruction. The room fell silent, listening to the echo of his words. Mark Rutte fixed his gaze on the assembled delegates. A palpable weariness gripped many present. I understand the fatigue of confrontation, he continued, but we cannot equate the aggressor with the victim. We must remember the tenets that have upheld international order for decades. Each word dripped with solemnity, his message soaring above the din of conflict. Mr. Nebens, Rutte said, addressing the Russian representative directly, your eloquence is no substitute for the reality of destroyed homes and shattered lives. Your beautiful words ring hollow amidst the cries for justice. Nebens remained unperturbed, a calm fortress in a storm of accusations. We aim not to be enemies of Russia, Rutte asserted, his voice unwavering, but enemies of oppression. To uphold the truth, we must impose sanctions. Freeze assets, actions we are committed to taking. As Rutte finished, a heavy silence replaced his words, like a shroud over the entire assembly. It was a silent acknowledgement of the dire realities faced by millions. With a sudden twist, the microphone fell silent, leaving the chamber awash in anticipation. The chairman turned his eyes toward Nebens again, granting him the final word. What would the Russian representative say in response? Would he rise to the challenge or retreat into silence? With this haunting question lingering in the air, the moment held its breath. The world was waiting, desperate to hear what Nebens would reveal next. In a room heavy with tension, echoes of history whispered through the air. Every delegate felt a profound weight, knowing they were witnesses to a diplomatic moment destined to be etched in time. Outside, the sky darkened, a reflection of the gravity that hung over the assembly. Each representative seemed to grasp the significance of their words. This wasn't a mere conversation but a potential turning point for nations. Vasily Nebens, Russia's envoy, stood composed yet contemplative, aware that the time to voice his thoughts was nearing. As the murmurs settled, he discerned the moment was ripe for a declaration. Slowly, he spoke, Gentlemen, let's not forget something fundamental. History is often penned by the victors, a phrase you wield like a sword. But each narrative has its counter-narrative. You may stand as conquerors today, dictating the timeline of events that shape your future, yet history is an unforgiving editor. Today, you may relish your status as victors, but I caution you, your pages may soon be rewritten, missing the glory you now revel in. His words sliced through the quietude, met with a mix of surprise and unease. He paused, allowing the gravity of his message to resonate, and then continued, You purport to safeguard a world that never solicited your protection. For too long, you dictated terms while others cried out for meaningful communication. Justice isn't a mere display of power, it is a journey. At that pivotal moment, Nebbins took a measured sip from his glass, grounding himself before the storm that was building. As tides shift, he insisted, voices from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, which have long been stifled, are finally making themselves heard. They aren't clamoring against you, they are rising to assert their own rights. The room fell silent, as if the very air around them thickened with a renewed sense of determination. In that instant, Nebbins knew he was not merely a spokesperson, he was a catalyst for change. The chamber had transformed into an arena where old narratives faced challenges, and the question loomed, would they listen, or would they drown out dissent with the clamor of impending conflict? And then the unexpected happened. As Nebbins wrapped up his remarks, the chairman's eyebrow lifted, a signal of unanticipated defiance. The leader of the assembly prepared to respond, yet the air was charged with a concern that no one had anticipated. Would the representatives acknowledge the rising chorus of dissent or cling to their complacency? The weight of the moment hung palpably, promising either confrontation or breakthrough. A second of intimacy with history beckoned, leaving the audience teetering on the brink of revelation. What would happen next? Would silence reign, or would it be broken by an outcry for justice that reverberated throughout the halls of power? In a tense diplomatic arena, filled with fluttering flags under artificial lights, Mark Rutte's scathing speech echoed, condemning Russia's actions as a war on sovereignty. Cameras captured every gesture, security eyes watching intently. Now, as tensions simmer like a storm ready to break, what if one man's words could shatter the facade of Western righteousness? The hall pulsed with unspoken electricity. Chairman's hand rose. The floor goes to the Russian representative. A wave of anticipation rippled through the crowd. Camera swung swiftly. The silly Nebenzia lingered, flipping pages, adjusting his microphone. He rose slowly. Chair, Mr. Rutte. His tone dipped low, almost hesitant. Yet a steely edge lurked, fine as a razor's whisper. You unleashed a torrent charged with emotion. But if diplomacy weighed by fury alone, the globe would have crumbled eons ago. Silence shattered, thin and uneasy. His gaze stayed steady. No tremors there. You decry our aggression. Yet, who pummeled Yugoslavia's sans sanction or safe harbor? Liberated Libya? Invaded Iraq? Not us. It was you. Cloaked in falsehoods of safeguarding freedom. He paced his delivery deliberate, surgical. Not to inflict wounds, but expose the rot beneath. You accuse us of vandalizing nations' bounds. Let's dissect that. But you engineered coups, wielded power as a bludgeon. Hijacked destinies. Rutte stiffened, poised to retort. The chairman interjected sharply. Adhere to protocol. Nebenzia pressed on, unmoved. You preach ethics, Mr. Rutte. Yet your armor stands where schools stood yesterday. You lament exiles. But your airstrikes wrecked lifelines. You envision Europe's path minus Russia. A beat hung heavy. Mr. Rutte. Pause. Europe sans Russia? It ceases to be. A core sans heartbeat. Choke artillery veins, the continent perishes. The words struck orchestral. None dared interject. Observers noted Rutte's rigid freeze, eyes darting fearfully. The chairman nodded curtly. Thank you, Russian representative. Impasse reigned. Cameras rolled on, air thick with stale polish and faint sweat. The chamber aired, sterile as a void. Lenses panned subtly back to him. No bystanders lingered in view. Nebenzia's focus fell inward. Tired restraint masked boiling depths within. He despised this theater, but grasped it. Emotion equaled disarmament here. Diplomacy demanded armor, not hearts. Rutte, across the table, appeared vanquished. His veneer cracked subtly. Security whispered, the crowd's favor had veered. An aide leaned in, concern etched. Rutte gripped papers tighter, knuckles whitening with gritted strain. The chairman murmured into his mic, voice muffled, eyes flicking nervously to the exit. Tensions coiled, invisible currents sparking through flesh like live wires. The room morphed into a frayed network, each phrase a potential spark. Then Ruta seized the mic unbidden. Volume spiked, cutting through fragile calm. You peddle tales of Soviet saviors in Europe. Stunned quiet descended. Heads turned in disbelief. Even techs paused, earpieces silent. Diplomats blinked wide. Nebenzia met it calmly. In those unflinching eyes, clarity dawned. He sipped water deliberately. Set the glass. Mr. Ruta, I must respond. A hush gripped all, operators alert despite it. When you claim Europe triumphed sans Soviets, you insult not Russians only. You slander millions of Dutch, French, Poles, Serbs, fighters allied with red tides. Ruta's face paled. You're Dutch, true? Your land occupied 5 years. Freed by whom? Yankees? Nay. Soviet steel liberated Berlin, while your cities still smoldered. Ruta slumped, jaw taut. Every Dutch lifeblood draws from our fallen. No paperwork signed. Just sacrifice. And now, post-war decades, you dismiss it? So facile, devaluing spilled liquor when air-conditioned suites shield you stateside? Each syllable bore leaden heft. In this crossroads, Nebenzia embodied the voiceless masses yearning for reckoning. No grudges. Just reminders. Ties binding Europe's soul to its past debts. Murmurs swelled from delegations, echoes of unease. A pin's drop would boom. Outside, Dutch press stirred like restless hawks. You hail Russia's absence as Europe's horizon? Nay. It's a rot-ridden prognosis. He released the mic, vibration subsided gradually. The chairman beckoned order, voices overlapping futilely. Reporters clustered, 2 giants, desk a chasm. Lenses closed in. One visage stoic as marble. The other, a coiled spring, brimming, betrayed. Ruta attempted utterance. Missed. Lips parted in vain. Then, what fuse had ignited, poised to erupt. Even as cameras devoured it all, secrets bubbled beneath, threatening to engulf them in flames no protocol could quench. A dramatic confrontation unfolds on the world stage in Zalisa. Just moments ago, Russian Representative Vasily Nebens was tragically killed before addressing Western leaders. What shocking truth did he uncover? Picture it, a charged atmosphere where diplomacy fractures, and a single statement could alter history. As Nebens arrived, dressed in a charcoal blue suit that clung to him with an aura of both calmness and an unsettling anticipation, the gravity of the moment loomed large. Navigating paths lined with flags, color swirling, symbolizing the histories of conflict and alliance, he approached the microphone, silently bracing for the storm ahead. The entrance of Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands, stirred an undercurrent of tension. His confidence shone through, but as he claimed, "For us, this is a war," a spark ignited a fierce clash of ideologies. What happens when rhetoric becomes the battlefield? As Nebens finally rises to speak, the hall holds its breath. Mr. Rutte, he begins, voice steady but thick with emotion. Your words mask deeper truths, hidden behind the facade of diplomacy. The questions that follow resonate with resonant echoes of history. Who bombed Belgrade? Who ravaged Libya? Each question strikes a nerve, reframing the narrative of power and accountability. In his quest for truth, Nebens confronts Rutte's moral compass. Could it falter in the light of his own nation's shadows? As Nebens recalls treachery in Afghanistan, murmurs ripple through the audience. Did he dare cross sacred boundaries? The weight of his words comes crashing down, juxtaposing violent pasts against a present heavy with unspoken conflicts. You speak of fear, yet your shadow stalked the streets of Guantanamo, he retorts, igniting a wave of gasps. The tension is palpable, the stakes could not be higher. Europe without Russia, he articulates, is like a heart without blood. The room quakes with the implications of his statement. Each person present, every nation represented, feels the haunting resonance of history colliding with current realities. This moment is larger than mere political spats, it has the potential to reshape alliances and dismantle long-held narratives. As Nebbins advances, the weight of history hangs in the air. Will this defiant stand be the catalyst for a new understanding, or will it slip into oblivion, another moment in a record of forgotten debates? Will the shadows of the past dictate the future, or will voices of change rise amidst the turmoil? The answers linger, tantalizing and elusive. What are we witnessing here? Are we mere spectators, or will this clash lead to a reckoning that reshapes the course of nations? The answer hangs, trembling with possibility, waiting to be uncovered.